Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Today we got some breakout wide receivers.
Let's go.
Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, Morgan Colby and Rick Lemon.
We talked about Clyde for about an hour on the last episode. That probably posted as a highlight video on Monday at some point in the evening.
Yeah. I don't care that we talked about Clyde that much because I'll do it again.
I tweeted some stuff and I was getting heated because people are just dumb.
Well, I just think people don't like Clyde. I don't know if I had to go that far, but yeah.
Anyway, my name is Morgan Colby. I got Rick Lemon with me as always. We got some stuff to get to in this episode. We're going to talk about the news a little bit later, but we're going to start with breakout wide receivers. Before we do that, check out our website, thefantasychampions.com. You can follow us on Twitter at the FF Champs. You can check out my handle at Morgan Colby _FF, Rick at Ricky Lemon _FF. Check us out on Instagram at the Fantasy Champions and on Facebook.com/the Fantasy Champions. If you're listening on any podcasting platform, be sure to leave a review and share any of that podcast with your friends. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, leave a comment. You know what to do, Fantasy Champs.
And guys, if you want to get the draft guide.
Oh, see, he's jumping right in. There you go.
$25. The guide is live. We got full rankings. We got breakouts, busts, player draft values, player breakouts, and so much more. If you guys order now as well, you will be entered in a chance to be in our listener league, and you can try to beat us. So tell your friends about it.
Yeah, definitely. Let's jump right into the main kahuna. You're talking about 3 players. The rest are in the draft guide, my friends. So if you want to friggin' win your league with breakout wide receivers, you probably should just buy the draft guide and find out who the rest of the wide receivers are, to be honest with you.
Right.
That's probably the best idea. But let's start with talking about some guys that we will give you for free on this episode. Absolutely free. We'll start off with DJ Moore. We talked a little bit about him as the offseason progresses. If we get to August and it feels like you've talked literally about every player in the history of society. And
it does.
It really does. I'm like, I feel like I've talked about DJ Moore 6 times, but then the opinions change as the offseason goes along, so it's just like new stuff every time.
Well,
But anyway, DJ Moore makes our breakout wide receiver list. He was, what did he finish at last year? The wide receiver.
It was, I think, in the top 15.
Yeah, wide receiver.
Could be wrong.
Probably low end, too,
I'll look it
up. He was wide receiver 18.
Okay, so
I mean, some might consider that a breakout. A lot of people thought, because a lot of people thought he was going to break out last year, and that didn't happen. I don't know that was due to him, more the fact that it was Cam Newton not being able to throw more than 40 and a half feet in front of him and not playing for most of the season. So that's probably the reason why. But last year he was number 10 in all of the NFL in targets with 135, about 9 per game. I've talked about the comparisons for me between him and Michael Thomas, not talent-wise, but opportunity-wise, with Teddy Bridgewater coming in and basically, taking over as quarterback. So, like last year, I said Michael Thomas, I was concerned about him midway through the season when Drew Brees went out, and I'm like, is he actually going to be able to perform at the same level that he did? And Bridgewater was able to get him the ball enough to perform at that level. With no other receivers on that team, with the exception of Curtis Samuel, there's a good chance that if they throw 550 to 560 times, maybe higher, that you could see DJ Moore hit 150 targets, maybe even 160. 160 is a stretch, but it would be fun to see.
That would be.
But with his catch rate, being 73%, when he has a catchable target, or 87% true catch rate.
87% true catch rate?
Yeah, 87% true catch rate, which means that if he has a quarterback who actually has his last year, he was number 69 in the NFL in target quality.
Disgusting.
horrible. And he only had 73% catchable target rate on 99 targets last year. So
he's still at 87 receptions. So next year, I think with Teddy Bridgewater, we can see at least a little bit of a bump in terms of catch rate from his 64% actual catch rate and something more closer to probably, I would say, 70 to 75%. And if that happens, he might hit 95 to 100, receptions and all of that good stuff. But the big thing is the yards per reception. That is what gets him over the top to me. And he's like, I believe I've referenced him as Leonard Fournette, the Leonard Fournette of wide receivers. Getting Why
like
is that?
1,100 to 1,200 receiving yards and only scoring like 4 touchdowns. So he's got to see more. He's got to see a positive regression in the touchdown category as well. But I could easily see him getting 90 to 100 receptions, 1,200 to 1,300 all-purpose yards, and like 8 to 9 touchdowns. And if that happens, I mean, he's easily a top 10 wide receiver.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you make all the right points with DJ Moore.
Of course I do.
But like, and even me, like I was higher on him, and then I had a stretch where I was kind of getting lower on him. And now I'm high on him.
Story
again.
of my life.
Look at his. It's just like the waves of the offseason.
Yeah.
His sleeper ADP too right now is ridiculous. I mean, he's going like the 5th round in most mock drafts that I've done.
Stop it! Why you fools so terrible at fantasy football?
No, dude. Don't tell him to do anything else. I want him in the 5th
I just drafted him in the 5th round.
In our home league, I want him to be there. In the
5th round. Now it's funny because I've been mock drafting. Our home league is 19 days away until we draft. And so I've been mocking like crazy for that draft. And I'm noticing that DJ Moore is conveniently following your picks, Rick, and not mine.
He is. But the thing is, you're going to take him in like the 3rd round.
No, I have other plans. I actually...
Okay.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I don't think so.
I really hope DJ Moore ends up on my team. And you made all the good points, but I'll just add a few stuff. Like he's 23 years old. It's 3rd year in the NFL. That's typically a big breakout year for receivers. He had 82 targets his rookie year. He had 135 last year. So it's going up every year. 15 games. So he was on pace for about 145 targets last year. And he did that with like Will Grier and Kyle Allen as his quarterback for most of the season.
Disgusting.
If he gets, just solid production from Teddy Bridgewater, I'm not even a big Teddy Bridgewater fan, but I think he's solid. If he can just get something solid, his catch rate could go up, or not his catch rate, but his catch percentage. And if he does that, it's possible to see DJ Moore get 100 receptions this year.
Yeah.
And 4 touchdowns is not good, but again, Kyle Allen, Will Grier, the offense other than McCaffrey didn't really do anything last year.
Yeah.
The whole Panthers team was kind of there. But I don't know if the Panthers are going to be great this year, but I think with Teddy Bridgewater there, the offense should at least be solid. I could see him getting like around 6 to 7 touchdowns this year.
Yeah.
Which will, and with the catch percentage going up with a couple more touchdowns, I could see him going from the wide receiver 18th last year to like the wide receiver 12 to 10 range.
Yeah.
And you talked about how Michael Thomas did last year with Teddy Bridgewater. He was getting, when Bridgewater came in, he was only throwing the ball like 30 times a game, but Michael Thomas was still getting 13 targets, 7, 9, 13, 12, 11. So he was still getting a good target share, and I think he was still a top 5 fantasy wide receiver. So he was still having a go-to guy. Like Michael Thomas was the go-to guy. If DJ Moore is that in the Carolina offense, then he's going to succeed.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I did want to point out, so when Cam Newton played for the majority of 2018, it was the year he only had like 82 targets and 55 receptions and such. He had 1.9 fantasy points per target. And last year, his fantasy points per target dropped to 1.71, which is not horrible in itself, but it's tough to be super efficient without Michael Thomas opportunity or a Davonte Adams opportunity when your fantasy point per target is that low. So I don't know. We'd have to see how Matt Rule runs his offense. I don't know what we can I do think that DJ Moore could be the Chris Godwin breakout next year. I don't know if he can be a top 3 guy. I think top 5 isn't within the realm of outcomes, like 4 or 5, and more likely probably 7 to 10. But which is still fantastic. You know what I mean? You're not losing anything getting a top 10 wide receiver in what was the 5th or 6th round. So, do you have any, let's play devil's advocate. Do you have any bad things that you're worried about with DJ Moore?
My one concern with him is they signed Robbie Anderson, and they have Curtis Samuel there. Yeah. McCaffrey's going to get 140 targets, 130 targets. So, the mouths to feed, is it going to be enough for DJ Moore? Because he's not going to get 10, 12 touchdowns. He's going to rely on yards and receptions. That would be my one concern, but I'm not too worried about it because the Panthers threw the ball a lot last year. I think they're going to throw the ball a good amount again this year. And I don't think Robbie Anderson's going to get 100 targets, and even if he gets a decent amount, like Greg Olsen is not there anymore. He had 90 targets.
Right.
So they have some vacated targets in that offense. So I'm not too concerned about it, but if I did have one, that would be it.
Mine would probably be his, in 2018 when he was with Cam Newton, he had about 11% red zone target share and a 12% end zone target share. In 2019, his red zone reception report, he was at 7, and his target share in the red zone was 23%, I believe. So he had a sizable increase. It was about 12 percentage points of an increase in red zone target share, and he only scored 2 more touchdowns. So, I mean, obviously that's probably a lack of efficiency in, that offense. So I would think that is going to increase just based on if they give him a 23% red zone target share again, I would think that he's probably going to produce more than 6 touchdowns. I would hope. But if he's the feature guy in that offense and he ends up doing that, Robbie Anderson, I think is a good valid reasoning to be afraid. But I think touchdown rate, if he's just not, sometimes guys are just not a good red zone target. Julio scores 3 touchdowns a year and we're just screwed.
Right.
Sometimes a guy just doesn't get it. But anyway, so let's talk about the next guy that we have on our list, Calvin Ridley. Now this guy's a little bit more of an interesting play because you see, the Falcons being able to throw the football 100 times a year, not 100 times a year, 800 times a year. But I think it's really difficult because I've been on a roller coaster with Calvin Ridley, and I'm not really sure exactly what he is yet, I guess. I think he's going to be a breakout player this year because he just increasingly gets better. But I'm almost Julio is still there, and Julio is going to take 170 targets or 160 targets or whatever. And there's still a massive amount of target share to be distributed. But I do think that Todd Gurley is going to take about 80 to 90 targets because that's very similar to what, Devonta Freeman got last year. So sure. I think that those two areas, you're going to see those guys kind of take from that. But you also lost Mohamed Sanu. You lost Austin Hooper, right? So there were targets that were left completely vacant in this offense. And a lot of people would argue, was it Hayden Hurst? I don't think he'll get more than 60 targets if you wanted to give him that. But with the amount that this offense throws the football, about 600 times a season, you still have a lot of target share left for Calvin Ridley to have success, right? So I think last year, 93 targets, I think you could see that increase through 13 games. So I'd love to do the pacing on him, but I think through 13 games, he had 93 targets, and that's probably about 120 on a full season. Let me just check on that to see if I am incorrect or correct. But I think for him, it's really going to be about target share this year. In terms of what you're looking for. So last year he had on 93 targets on 13 games. He would have come away with 114 targets total on the season. So I think he'll get to 120, which is where Chris Godwin was. The big thing about Calvin Ridley is that the year before he caught about 10 touchdowns. Yeah, he caught 10 touchdowns in 2018. 2019, that went down to 7. Austin Hooper was vulturing touchdown catches from Calvin Ridley. With Calvin Ridley Calvin Ridley now free of Austin Hooper, the red zone targets that he was getting in 2018 are going to come back to him, and he's going to get them in 2019. So it would not be unreasonable to believe, that, and when you look at the pacing metrics, he would have hit 9 touchdown catches in 2019. So I don't think it's unreasonable to believe that he's probably going to catch 11 to 12 touchdowns next year. And if you increase his target share to 120 to 130 and he catches, maybe 80 passes or something like that and 1,000 receiving yards and he catches 12 touchdowns, he's going to be a player that you can get, what pick is he going at? Pick 41 in sleeper ADP. You can get him and he could be a player that breaks onto the scene as a top 7. Like I see him as a Kenny Golladay type player. I don't know if you see comparisons to that.
Sure.
A guy who ends up 6 or 7 next year. He's definitely like, if anything happens to Julio, he has like I hate to use this phrase all the time, but baked in value of being the number 1 wide receiver on, like he's going to get the Julio Jones target share if Julio was to get hurt or, get COVID or something happens. Right.
Right.
So Ridley would get that workload, and he doesn't do what Julio does in terms of, he's not the same player, but he can get the same yardage in the reception count and target share as Julio Jones if Julio Jones was to go down, with the touchdowns that we were just talking about Julio doesn't get. So I think Calvin Ridley can be ridiculously good. It's just a matter of when that happens. So
I've heard a lot of people, you're either with or against Calvin Ridley this year. And like, I remember we did a dynasty startup league not so long ago, and I took him in the 4th or 5th round. And it was like controversial that I took him there. And it was like, feels kind of early for Calvin Ridley in the 4th or 5th round. And like, there's a lot of people that are down on Calvin Ridley. I'm not one of those people.
Yeah.
I am the complete opposite. I am on board of the Calvin Ridley train completely. He made a lot of good points with like his red zone share when Austin Hooper not there. Did you know the Falcons threw the ball almost 700 times last year?
700 times?
In the NFL in pass attempts by almost 50 passes.
And Rick, I got a question. Did their defense get any better?
No.
Okay, so
they took a corner in the first round, I think. They took a corner. Well, like he was a projected 2nd round pick. I mean, you can make the argument that he might be better, but that's one player. Like, they didn't really do anything on defense.
Yeah.
Their team is pretty much the exact same as it was last year. You take out Sanu, you take out Austin Hooper, and I've heard people say that like there's not a lot of targets there for Calvin Ridley because Julio is there. Julio is gonna get his.
Julio got his last year.
Right, he's going to get his 160 targets, and there's still going to be like almost 600 targets to go around.
Yeah,
like people don't realize how much the Falcons throw the ball.
There is more targets to go around on that team after you divvy up Julio Jones's targets.
Yep. Than
there are on most NFL teams.
I mean, if you want to, Devontae Freeman had 70 targets last year. If you want to give him early 80 to 90, I don't think he's going to get that quite much, but I think he'll get around 70. But if you want to give him 80, 90, fine. If you want to give Hayden Hurst like around 90 targets, which I don't even think he's going to, I think he'll get like around 75, 80. But if you want to give him the 90 to 100 targets that Hooper got last year, fine. There's still a ton of targets to be had for Calvin. He had 93 last year in 13 games. That's what paced for like 120.
Right.
I think that's going to go up to like 135, 140 this year, maybe even 150.
I mean, if that's what happens, I mean, Calvin Ridley he could, and God forbid I say this on a podcast and share my opinion.
Be careful. Be careful.
I think Calvin Ridley could be a top 5 wide receiver with that 130 to 140, target share. Like, everyone's talking about how DJ Moore could be Chris Godwin. I for sure as hell think that Calvin Ridley could be Chris Godwin. You know what I mean?
Absolutely,
and no one's talking about it. That's the thing that drives me crazy is that everyone's just like, oh, well, I think it's because we've been talking about a Calvin Ridley type. Like, his rookie season was really good. And then last year we were like, oh, he's going to break out. And Austin Hooper, was something that we have been talking about for years, as continually jumping, onto the scene as a featured tight end. But, that's just the big thing for me is that with him gone and with Mohamed Sanu gone, all these targets are going to Calvin Ridley. You know what I mean? You know why people do that? It's because the dynasty people are hyping up Russell Gage.
Oh.
If you're telling me Russell Gage is going to get more target share than a first-round quality wide receiver,
Gage is not going to affect Russell Gage took
dude,
off last year when Julio went down and Calvin Ridley went down.
Yeah,
that was when Russell Gage got his big games last year.
Calvin Ridley is going to be the feature wide receiver in this offense beside Julio. He's going to be the number 2 guy, and he's going to get the targets. And I think if what you said happens, the 140 targets, I mean, I want all of that, especially when he catches as many touchdowns as he does.
I think he's going to get around 140 targets. He's going to be the red zone guy as well. I think Hayden Hurst is going to, I don't think he's going to have a monster year because I don't think he's going to get as many targets as Hooper was getting per game. But red zone wise, you can factor in Hayden Hurst if you want for a couple touchdowns. Julio Jones will get his around 6-7 touchdowns. But Calvin Ridley's going to get he's going to be the main red zone guy.
Yeah.
And Matt Ryan threw 26 touchdowns last year in 15 games. The team threw 29 touchdowns if you include the game that Matt Shaw played in. So there's going to be touchdowns to go around. There's going to be targets to go around. There's plenty of work for Calvin Ridley for next year.
Yeah. What do you say we move on to AJ Brown? I just got alerts that my credit card's trying to be hacked. About 12 transactions just tried to go through. They're all getting rejected.
Oh my gosh.
Let's move on.
Great.
Let's move on to AJ Brown. He is our last breakout wide receiver. We have more on the draft guide, so please buy the draft guide. Check out the rest of our breakout players, and you'll learn a lot from that, I guess. AJ Brown, though, he is an interesting player, and I think the reason, a lot of people are kind of hesitant on AJ Brown, and for me right now, the difficulty is his ADP, is that he's picked 39. He's been moving up boards rapidly this offseason, and it kind of scares me a little bit, to be honest with you. What is that, a 4th round pick, 3rd round pick, somewhere in that vicinity, maybe in a 12 team or 3rd round?
Yeah, 3rd or 4th, somewhere.
But the thing about AJ Brown that I think is so impressive is just his what you thought DK Metcalf was going to be. When DK Metcalf was really good last year, he had 100 targets.
DK Metcalf was great last year.
He was great last year. But everyone forgot about how ridiculously big AJ Brown is.
Oh, true, yeah.
And it's
he's the other guy in the picture.
He's the same. I know. He's the same. He's not the same, in terms of height and weight and all that stuff, but he's just when you watch him on film, he's big. He looks like a running back catching a football and running downfield. You know what I mean? Except he's got elite speed, you know what I mean, in terms of his speed score and all of that stuff. So it's I think AJ Brown is he's a guy that catches a 40-yard pass and then trucks you over like Derrick Henry. I don't know. That's just when you watch him play, that's what you see. So he's a very, 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 very big and physically talented wide receiver. Last year, he had 84 targets for 52 receptions and 1,051 yards and 9 touchdowns. He had 20 yards per reception, which is number 3 in the entire NFL, and a 77% true catch rate. With only a target quality of 6.9. How many games did Marcus Mariota start, by the way?
He started the first 6 games of the season.
Okay, so I'm going to pace.
Tannehill came in week 6, but I would start it week 7.
I'm going to pace week 7 on. He would have had 100 targets, about 61 receptions, 1,245 yards, and 10 touchdowns, which is right in the vicinity of 200 plus fantasy points at the wide receiver position for AJ Brown. But they also utilized him on the ground, 5 rushes, 96 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I don't know if I would actually include the 2 touchdowns in there, but if he gets 100 yards rushing too in some ridiculous world, even if we just say he gets 4 rushes for, 50 yards, you know what I mean? That's fantasy points on top of the cake. But if he gets over 205 fantasy points, he's easily a top, 8 or 9 wide receiver. And I think that's what you can kind of expect from AJ Brown at this point. It's hard because it's he's starting to reach it. And I talk about this all the time with players in fantasy football. I hate when players reach their value. You know what I mean? Reach where I think they're going to finish in terms of value in fantasy, in terms of ADP. Right. So he's I think he's probably going to finish as at worst a top 14 wide receiver. But, if you're drafting him as the 10th or the 11th or the 12th wide receiver off the board, you're drafting him at his at his floor or ceiling or whatever you want to say. And it's it hurts me a little bit. But knowing what you might get out of him, It's insane. Now, a regression in the yards per reception area is probably expected, but I can, like, with the talent that he is, you know what I mean? There is enough for him there to get to 120 targets. I don't expect any more than that. But as a second-year wide receiver, there's no reason to believe that he can't reach 120 targets.
Oh, yeah, for sure. For me, I wasn't high on A.J. Brown before I did my projections because I was kind of I didn't think Tannehill would quite put up the same year he did last year. But then after I did my projections and I did my A.J. Brown research through the offseason, I was much higher on him. First of all, last year he put up those fantastic numbers. I think he only had 90 targets the whole year. He had 84 targets the entire season. He put up those massive numbers. This year he's going to get more targets. I mean, Corey Davis, who I love, love Corey Davis, but he's not going to really do anything. Adam Humphries isn't going to get 100 targets. You know, Johnny Smith's a big breakout candidate, but even if he does break out, he's still not going to get like 100 targets.
Yeah.
A.J. Brown will most likely get 100 targets. There's, the Titans don't throw the ball a lot, but there's not any mouths to feed in that offense. So A.J. Brown is going to get an upgrade in targets this year. And then one thing that I noticed too, if you pace out those weeks that you were talking about, week 7 to 17, A.J. Brown was the wide receiver 3 in all of fantasy. Right when Tannehill was the starting quarterback. So even if Tannehill does regress a little bit, I still think A.J. Brown can finish as like the top 7, 8, 9 range for wide receivers.
Yeah.
So he is a perfect breakout type receiver.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. I mean, like, I think a lot of the concerns that people are having are efficiency, related, where he was getting 20 yards a reception. Sure. He was at 2.58 fantasy points per target, which is number 2 in the entire NFL. So, I mean, do we think that is going to regress? Yes. The thing that I think is also a concern for a lot of people, including myself, is that when you look at how many targets, or how many pass attempts Ryan Tannehill had last year, and you pace that out, it was like just under 500. So, they don't have anybody else to throw the football to besides A.J. Brown and Corey Davis at this point. And is it Johnny Smith? Yes.
Yeah, Johnny Smith.
So, you know what I mean? But it's like, with only 475 to 500 targets, it's hard for me to look at them and say, oh, yeah, that's going to be a huge opportunity for A.J. Brown to have success, which is why I say maximum he's going to have 120 targets. But I don't think he needs it. You know what I mean? And that's the big thing for him. It's like, I don't think he's going to be a top 3 wide receiver, but I think that there's a realm of outcomes where he ends up, maybe top 6 or 7, especially with a little bit of regression. But when you bring up those, what was it? What is that? 10 games, those 10 weeks, he was the freaking wide receiver 3 over that stretch as a rookie. And so it's like, if you're sitting here going, oh, well, I don't like him because of this, this, and this, it's like, I don't give a frick if you like him or not. That's the facts.
If Tannehill would have to have an awful season next year, I think, for A.J. Brown to be non-existent.
That is so true. And I have no idea. I still, you know what? I pretend that I know what I'm talking about with that guy. I have no idea.
With Tannehill?
You could say, with Tannehill, yes. You could say you could say he has a great season and be justified, and you could say he has a terrible season and be justified.
I don't think anybody knows.
So I did want to bring up those last 4 games of the season where he just took over. He was a monster. He had in PPR 33 fantasy points in week 14, 25 in week 15, 15 in week 16, and 22 in week 17. And that all paces out. Do you want to hear the pacing numbers on this? Because it's kind of interesting. He has 120 targets for 72 receptions, 1,700 yards, and 16 touchdowns. He also rushes it 8 times for 248 yards and 4 touchdowns. So, like,
I'm not even taking his rushing into account. Like, if he does that again,
if he does that, that's 23 yards per reception. So that's not going to happen. But like, if you were to just give him 70 targets, you know what I mean? I mean, 70 receptions, and put him right around, let's just say 18 yards per reception, he's already at 1,260. And if he catches, 12 touchdowns, you're just, It's ridiculous. I'm trying to calculate the fantasy points really fast. My calculator. I need
a
a double. I need a double key. My keypad at work. I have like a little like square with numbers on it, and it allows me to type way faster in my calculator. But anyway, so 72 fantasy points plus the 1250. He's already at like 198. And that's without the fantasy points and half PPR and PPR for reception. So it's like, I mean, I don't want to say he's a lock top 10 wide receiver because we don't know.
No, yeah.
Because we don't know about Tannehill. But I think there's a real opportunity for this guy to absolutely explode. That stat got me sweaty, dude. 10 games, he was the wide receiver 3.
Yeah. Let's
go.
He definitely, he has the ability to, but like, and I know he's not going to be that efficient next year with like his yards per reception. But he's also known for being a big play type player and a big red zone player. So that's not going to change. Like he might still have like, what did he have? Like 20 yards per reception. That will probably go down, but by how much?
Yeah.
Right. Like if I think he can still be like 18 yards per reception, 17 and a half.
Right.
Like in that range.
I mean, if he gets somewhere right around 20, I mean, you're still talking about insanely good play. Like, I don't know. Right. The more we talk about him, the more I get sweaty. And I wasn't going to draft him, but
only two concerns is Tannehill and then
Tannehill and target share. That's about it. All right. We are going to talk about the news next, but before we do, we have a quick word from our sponsor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it is a hosting platform that makes it super easy to make podcasts. So if you're listening to us and going, hey, you know what? I want to do that. I want to talk about fantasy football on a podcast, or you want to talk about anything on a podcast, you should use Anchor. We just switched this week to Anchor, and it has been like probably the easiest experience of my entire life when it comes to a hosting platform. It's free, 100% free. You don't have to pay $18, $19, $20 a month to host your podcast. There's creation tools that allow you to record, edit, and upload your podcast right from your phone or computer. And then Anchor is going to distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many other platforms. It's a pain in the butt to get your podcast on every platform. That is a helpful feature. And you can also make money from your podcast with a no minimum listenership. So if you have 10 listeners, you can totally jump on this and make money right away. It's everything you need to, it's everything you wanted in a podcast all in one place. So be sure to download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. You won't regret it. Let's jump into the news, boss.
All right, let's do it.
So
it's gonna be a COVID list.
We're gonna like just bang through this very quickly.
Okay.
There are helpful. We might make one, maybe throw it in the draft guide, but a COVID opt-out list. That probably is a good idea. There's several websites. I think Fantasy Pros has one. It's just a running list of players that have opted out. Nobody major besides Damian Williams has opted out, unless you want to consider Funchess like a major player. But we're going to talk about we'll quickly go through this list of COVID-19 related stuff. So the Vikings, they placed Justin Jefferson on the reserve COVID-19 list. The reserve COVID-19 list doesn't necessarily mean he has or either one of the players, all the players that we're going to talk about. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have COVID-19 or that they tested positive. It just means that they tested positive or they've been in contact with somebody who had it and they just need to quarantine for 2 weeks. Yeah. So these players haven't tested positive from what I know. They just maybe were in contact with somebody, but Justin Jefferson's on that list. Huge ding for a rookie wide receiver to be on that list. It kind of sucks because this is one of those
in general. But
this is one of those guys that I thought was going to be like one of the Terry McLaurin like wide receivers next year. And I don't know that can happen, especially when he's not going to get time on the field.
Yeah, I think
especially in training camp.
It's early enough though where he can still come back
and play. Yeah. He's going to play this season. It's a lot of like learning that he's completely missing out on. Sure. But anyway, Keyshawn Vaughn, the Bucks third round running back placed on the injured reserve, not injured reserve, on the COVID-19 list as well. Interesting little stat I tweeted the other day. Keyshawn, so the year David Johnson broke out, I guess when Bruce Arians was coaching the Arizona Cardinals at the time, he had drafted David Johnson in the third round. He signed Chris Thompson to replace his third round speedy running back, and then drafted David Johnson. David Johnson broke out that year. So now they're saying they signed Bucks. They signed LaShawn McCoy, which we'll talk about later. Well, I'll just say LaShawn McCoy signed with the Bucks. So they signed LaShawn McCoy, drafted Keyshawn Vaughn to replace Ronald Jones. So does it match up? Does Keyshawn Vaughn have a breakout? We don't know. We spent a lot of time yucking up Ronald Jones on the last podcast, and
and then as we ended it,
that news came through. So I believe we talk about it at some point here, but the Bucks did sign LaShawn McCoy. So speaking Tuesday, 49ers GM John Lynch said it was fair to say Debo's going to miss time to start the regular season. Not unexpected. I think he's probably going to miss 2 to 3 weeks. Where are you with drafting Debo at this point?
He's getting lower and lower, honestly. I think once he comes back, though, he could be a real great second half type player that you could trade for, maybe.
Right.
If I can put him on the IR list, and if you're
to start the season,
then I think he's still a fine 7th round pick. But I've seen him go as low as the 9th, 10th round.
Yeah. Devin Funchess opted out. Davonte Adams about to get 100 million targets.
Yep, 100 million at least.
Lamar Jack. That's not even going to touch his ADP though. People aren't even going to care. They're going to draft Tyreek Hill over him anyway. Lamar Jackson believes free agent Antonio Brown is the type of guy they need in our locker room. I don't know what Lamar's talking about.
Yeah, what? Do you need him in the locker room because he's good?
I don't know. I don't know what that means. The league also announced that if Antonio Brown does, whether or not he signs with a team, he is going to be suspended the first 8 games of 2020. So if he doesn't sign with a team until after week 8, or I'll say after 8 games, so that would be week 8, he can play if he signs week 9.
Right.
But if he signs with, say, the Ravens, that's so sad. Lamar's oh, we need Hollywood Brown's brother, or not brother, cousin to come, or uncle. I don't know what his relation is.
He's cousin, I think. He's cousin.
But we need him to come in and play, to be in our locker room, because the other Brown we have is not good enough. So
I don't think it's not good enough. I think he just wants multiple weapons.
Yeah, that's true. But anyway, so if Antonio Brown signs with the Ravens, he's going to be suspended 8 games. If he doesn't get signed with the Ravens, he's going to be suspended 8 games. I think this is what people have been waiting for, and I think he'll probably sign if people want him at this point. Otherwise, he's just not going to sign, period. I could see teams waiting on him too, by the way. Anyway, the Lions placed Kenny Golladay and TJ Hawkinson and Matthew Stafford all on the COVID-19 list. So basically the entire team.
Yep. Only the Lions.
Only the Lions. And then, like we said, LaShawn McCoy signed with the Bucks, leaving Devonta Freeman with literally no options besides signing with Philly. And if he does that, I will formally resign from my position as CEO of the Fantasy Champions.
Nah, dog. If Devontae Freeman signs with the Eagles, I still think Miles Sanders will be good. I don't think he's going to be as good as we want him to be, but he'll still be solid.
I was listening to a podcast today, and they said that Miles Sanders had 52% snap share last year, and he still had, I think it was 60 targets or 70 targets.
I don't get why people are so low on him. I really don't.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. Like, if he really is the full-time workhorse back,
he gets 65%.
He's gonna get like maybe 70 catches.
Yeah,
and I don't know if I'm being crazy saying that. It is what it is. But I hope Devonta Freeman does not sign with them. I'm hoping that another team gets needy, like New England. Yeah. Please sign Devonta Freeman. I don't care.
I think New England has a different plan, but I'll bring that up in a minute.
the NFL's deadline for opting out because they haven't signed the frickin' paperwork is getting extended to Thursday or Friday this week. Kind of pissed off about that, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I want this to be over so I can adjust my freaking projections, because I'm not just going to aimlessly adjust my projections when I don't know what's going on. So Thursday or Friday will be the deadline for that, hopefully. The Patriots tight end Matt Lacoste, he opted out. So we have almost, I think it's 9 players from the Patriots that opted out. Every other team has like 2 or 3. The Patriots have 9. Don't know what's going on there. They do have $25 million in cap space, and now Devin Asiasi and the other tight end they got is going to get a lot of opportunities. So I don't know if that has any effect on the season.
Devin Asiasi is a fantastic dynasty play, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I forgot who the other tight end's name is. I'm sorry, bro. Dalton Keene, yeah. So he's a good pass catcher, too. The Patriots also placed Sony Michel on the PUP list, along with, not that you were going to draft him, Mohamed Sanu.
So
the Pats are decimated.
I've been up and down on Sony all year. I was up when they signed Cam Newton. Now I'm kind of down on him again because I honestly think Damian Harris is going to be the starting linebacker for the Patriots. I really do. Call me crazy, but they did this with James White.
You're on the train?
They did this. Yeah, I am on the train. Because what Belichick has done in the past, he'll draft a running back in like the 3rd round.
Mm-hmm.
He'll pretty much redshirt him the first year.
There you go. Preview to our late round value show per Rick, Damian Harris.
I like Damian Harris. I do. I'd still take a risk on Sony because if he is the starter,
yeah.
he's still going to get a lot of work.
I got a question for you. J.K. Dobbins in the 7th round or Sony Michel in the 7th round?
I mean, right now, I'd probably take
I've been
Sony,
taking Dobbins,
but
to be honest with you.
I
mean, I can get both at my pick in our draft. Who cares?
Yeah. The way it's going right now, I'd take Dobbins.
Yeah, me too.
I'd still lean Sony right now, but if it keeps trending this way, I'm going Dobbins.
So Tim McManus reported that Doug Peterson, Eagles head coach, tested positive for coronavirus. Unfortunate. Hopefully he recovers and his family does not reciprocate the coronavirus amongst each other, if that's the right proper verbiage.
Pretty much.
The Cleveland Plain dealer. So Odell, did you hear what he said? This clown. I love Odell Beckham. I love him so much, but sometimes this man says some things. So he said that if you don't want to play, you have the opportunity to opt out. But he says the owners are forcing them to play, and that they shouldn't be playing this year. And I'm like, if you don't want to play, then don't play. No one's forcing you to. But then he says, I'm not opting out. I'm going to play.
I don't know. I don't know.
Odell literally makes 0 cents 90% of the time.
Yeah.
So he has no plans of opting out, according to a Cleveland reporter. So don't worry about Odell. We haven't had one major player opt out. You know what it is?
Hopefully it stays that way.
You know why that is? I was reading some of the plan that was proposed, and I don't know why the NFL accepted this crap deal.
Yeah.
Or the NFLPA, I should say. So if a player, if a high caliber player like Odell were to opt out, he gets $350,000, like a $350,000 check there. And then the following, so then he doesn't lose a season with the team, so he doesn't lose a contract year. So they don't accrue a contract year this year if they choose to opt out. They get $350,000, but then next year they lose $350,000 in their contract. So they basically take the money from next year's contract and pay them now. But for a player like Odell Beckham, he's getting paid ridiculous amounts of money. So he doesn't want to lose 350. He doesn't care about 350,000. He wants his 20 million. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's why the bigger players are not opting out right now. I was waiting for some big names to drop, and we never got any. So I think it's because they want to make their cheddar and they don't want to just get 350,000. Whereas a lot of lower level players are opting out. A guy who's in free agency opted out. Good luck, bro. Why didn't you just not sign with a team? Why did you choose to opt out?
Well, this way he gets money, right?
That's true. That is very valid. He gets a free $350,000.
Sign with the team, you wouldn't.
Anyway, And then the last piece of news, unless you had something to say about that.
No. Just keep going.
The last piece of news is Jordan Reed, formerly of the Washington football team. The 49ers signed Jordan Reed.
1 year deal, right?
1 year deal, I think. Yeah. I screwed that up somehow. But anyway, what does this mean, if anything, for George Kittle? I don't think it means anything, to be honest with you.
I mean, it's a good football move just because if he's not healthy, then you can cut him. If he's healthy, then he's a solid second tight end. But it's not going to mean anything fantasy-wise.
Okay.
For any player.
Fully agree with that. That'll do it for this episode of the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Sorry for the length on the news. It's just COVID-19 season, I guess.
It is. A lot of news.
Don't forget to check out our website, thefantasychampions.com. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Be sure to buy that draft guide. Don't forget. Talk to you on Thursday, Fantasy Champs, or Wednesday.
Later.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes and YouTube and follow us on Twitter @TheFFChamps.